Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm going to do a colored pencil drawing of this owl. The list of the materials and the reference will be in the description, and as always, if you want longer videos and more content, you should check out my Patreon. Let's go. This is going to be a slightly smaller size drawing. I think it's about 5 inches in width and about 6.5 in height. I'm going to be using the usual combination when I work in colored pencil: Polychromos on 1000 grit sanded paper, and I'm going to start with this background. The background is going to be mostly pretty dark, almost black, with just a few touches of maybe some greens and some other colors, but mostly a dark background. This will provide a nice contrast for my main subject, the owl. The owl is the horned owl or tiger owl. Now, I checked out some other references. The reference for this one will be in the description, as I said. But in some of the other pictures, the owl appeared to have some slightly warmer colors, maybe more brownish tones. In this one, on the other hand, it looks a bit more grey, more greyish. But I'm just gonna use warm grey colored pencils for the most part, and add a few touches of some browns, maybe ochre, and some other colors. We'll see. Anyway, I did a bit of blending with this background, both with my brushes and my fingers. And the reason why you can use your fingers is because this surface is a bit different than the regular paper, because it grinds down on the pigment and you can move it a bit more easily. It's a little bit more rough on your fingers, but since this is a 1000 grit surface, it's not that hard, it's not that bad. So in the background I added some touches of green. And now I'm going to move on to the main subject itself. I'm going to start with these horn-like feathers, or tufts of feathers, which look like horns. And for them, I used an ochre, a burnt ochre, and a bit of raw umber. And I'm going to go around them with a black colored pencil just to make sure that that they stand out against the background nicely. I added some other browns in there. I added a touch of burnt sienna, which is more reddish, because I felt that it should maybe be a little bit warmer. Now moving on to the eyes and this eyebrow area. A lot of owls always look like they're frowning. This one is in particular has that appearance. Now here we have a very nice contrast between this darker edge around the eye and the iris itself, which is going to be mostly bright yellow. But I put in this catch light first using a white colored pencil. Not that I can't put in lighter details on top of the darker ones on sanded paper. It's just that when you put it on directly, it tends to be a lot brighter and cleaner. So whenever I can do that, I like to use that opportunity. So now you can see a nice contrast between the pupil, which is almost pitch black, and that catch light. And now I'm going to go on to the iris. And I'm going to start with some browns here. I added some walnut brown at the top. I then moved on with some burnt sienna to get some slightly more warmer reddish colors. And then I'm going to add some yellows to the main part of the iris. I even added a touch of ochre and of course a touch of black at the top, just under the eyelid, because there's going to be some shadow there. And now I'm going to go in with this yellow colored pencil. And I'm going to use two yellow colored pencils. I don't know exactly what their names are. I think this is the cadmium yellow. That's like a slightly warmer yellow with a touch of orange in it maybe. And this is like a regular yellow, which is a little bit brighter. And I'm putting that in the middle here. So I'm kind of trying to create a nice gradient from these slightly darker and warmer parts of the iris to the lighter part, which is catching most light from the light source, because the upper part of the eye is partly in the shadow because of the eyelid. Now I'm going to move on with the beak, and I'm going to draw that with a black colored pencil, but I'm just going to have the tip sticking out. The rest of it is going to be obscured by these feathers around it. And here on the left, around the edge, I also need to make this edge look like a bunch of small fine feathers. And first I'm going to start with some warm grey. This is a light warm grey in the Faber Castell range. I mean, if you're using different pencils, you're just going to have to find an equivalent if you're trying to draw something like this. But I'm mostly using warm greys, and I know that they may appear a little bit cooler here. That's either because of my camera or because of the influence of the background color of the sandpaper, even though I think this background color of the sandpaper is kind of like a mid-tone grey, a little bit more on the warmer side, I think. The camera kind of distorts that a little bit because it doesn't pick up the colors, or not the camera, the lighting actually. Yeah, so I added a touch of brown here in this transition between the forehead area and the beak area, and I added some variation in that light grey tone. Now I'm going to start adding some of these spots and stripes, and I'm going to use a bit of brown, but for the most part I'm going to use a black colored pencil. Now I should probably say something that I forgot to mention at the beginning. In addition to the Faber Castell black colored pencil, I'm also using the Kohinoor silky black pencils. These are, I feel, a little bit darker, especially when you layer them on top of other pencils. So I'm going to use these here, and they're going to get me a nice contrast between these lighter feathers and these darker ones that kind of look like stripes, which is probably why this owl is also called the tiger owl. Now, to further enhance this contrast, I'm going to put in some touches of even lighter color. This is a ivory colored pencil. It's kind of like a warmer yellowish white. It's a little bit darker and a little bit more yellowish than white. And I'm going to use that around the left edge and at the top, basically around that part of the owl which is facing the light source and which is going to be a bit lighter. The light source is coming more from the left, obviously, so, and from above. So the catch light is also facing that way, and the lighter feathers will also be on that side. Naturally, that won't stop me from adding some of these lighter bits even on the other side as well, but I'm going to use that sparingly because I'm just kind of layering the lighter colors on top of the darker ones. And in addition to that, I'm also layering a bit of these warmer colors just to mix those in with the grays to make the color of the owl's feathers appear a bit warmer. Like I said, I'm not really sure what exactly the feathers are supposed to look like. In some references they appear a little bit more grayish, in others a bit more brownish. Mine is going to be something in between, I suppose. Now we have some of these shorter, finer feathers that almost look like hairs that grow around the beak, and I'm adding a touch of ochre there as well. The good thing about this surface is that the colored pencils behave almost like pastel pencils to a certain degree, because you can actually blend them and layer them a lot more easily. Now here around the edge I want to create an illusion of some finer feathers, so I don't want very clean lines, so I can achieve that effect just by controlling the amount of pressure. I can just drag my pencil a little bit and create some blurrier, lighter marks to create an appearance of those finer feathers. And I can do this in other places as well, where I don't want such clean, well-defined marks. So I want the feathers to look kind of finer, thinner, fluffier a little bit. And in order to achieve that effect, you can also control the amount of pressure on your pencil, because when you use a sharp pencil and when you use a little bit more pressure, you will tend to get cleaner marks. But that too has its limitations, obviously, because when the tooth gets saturated with the color, then you can't really layer much on top of it, and there's not much you can do. But this surface can take a few layers, and that allows me to work both from dark to light and light to dark, which is very good when you're trying to draw such detailed subjects such as this one, because this is a pretty detailed subject with a lot of these finer, smaller feathers, and it would be the same if I were drawing a furry animal. One of the best examples of that is that drawing of tiger I did in this same technique, using the same tools, but that one was on a slightly larger size. That was around 9 times 12 inches. And I'm going to put the link in the description if you want to, or rather in the end screen, if you want to check that one out as well. I've done quite a number of colored pencil drawings of wildlife now. Mostly I've been doing some portraits recently, but I just wanted to do something slightly different just to break the monotony, and I haven't drawn any birds recently, so I thought this would be a very interesting subject. And I deliberately started with the eye. Once I did that portion of the background at the top and on the left, I deliberately started with the eye, because that's probably the most important and the most engaging part of the drawing when you're drawing wildlife, especially if you have that nice contrast and those nice colors and a nice catch light. And sometimes even if you don't have a catch light in your reference photo, maybe you can add one, or maybe you can modify it slightly. I made mine a little bit larger in this drawing. In my reference photo it's a little bit smaller, it's a little bit less conspicuous. Here I made it a bit larger because I wanted I wanted more contrast, and I wanted that eye to look a bit more lively. I don't know if I achieved that effect, you'll be the judge, but right now I'm putting down some finishing touches on the eye and around the eye, and you'll notice that I also added a touch of orange to that iris to make it a little bit warmer and a bit more interesting. Now the hair here, or rather the feathers, these fine feathers that almost look like small hair around the eyelid area, around the eye socket area, they're kind of interesting because they go in circles, and we have layers of different colors there. I put in a little bit of ochre and brownish tones, and then some grayish and black tones. Those feathers that grow around the eye kind of make the owl's eye even larger, more round and more menacing. So now moving on with these feathers here on the neck area and the chest area. And I also have some warmer tones here. I'm going to be putting in some ochre and brownish tones here and there. But my main colored pencil for these lighter feathers will be the ivory colored pencil. It's not exactly white, it's a bit warmer, which is what I want here. and at the same time it's light enough to create contrast between these lighter and darker feathers. Now here around the neck area, or this area under the beak, we have some folds in those feathers, kind of like the folds in the fur on furry animals around the neck. And here we have those same folds that form around the part where the owl's head moves a lot. And I'm going to have kind of like a mixture of some black and white feathers, or groups of feathers. So I first put down some of the darker bits, and I'm just putting down some of the finishing touches on the eye area, refining the appearance of those small hairs a little bit. Now for the chest area and the neck area, I decided to use this approach. I decided to put in these darker feathers first, these darker patches first, because when I looked at it, it seemed a little bit complex, and I was looking for a way to simplify it and make it a little bit faster. And I was thinking maybe I want these darker patches to be really dark, and if I put in lighter colors first, it may be difficult for me to achieve these darker tones. So I decided to put in these darker tones first, and then maybe leave some spaces for the lighter bits in between, and then I can easily work with lighter colors on top of that. But we're going to have a mixture of some grayish and some darker tones here, as well as some brownish tones as well. But like I said, this was my approach. First put in or block in these darker areas, and then I'll start refining the details. Now after those darker bits were in place, I started adding some light warm grey tones or details, and you can see how I'm trying to imitate the appearance of these short feathers, which are kind of stacked in rows, one on top of the other. Now normally I don't really like drawing feathers because I find it a little bit complicated and exhausting, but here it's not that bad. Now here we had some of these lighter feathers growing out, and we have nice contrast between those groups of lighter feathers and darker feathers, and you can see how I made it look like those lighter ones are simply sticking out and catching more light from the light source. And it's easy to do this, it's easy to achieve that effect, because you can go over the darker areas a little bit. You can work from dark to light here. On regular paper, this effect would be a little bit more difficult to achieve. And the same goes with the rest of this chest area, because I'm going to be I have this large area here which I'm going to cover with an ivory colored pencil, which I left blank, and that's going to be covered easily, but I'm going to be working with that lighter colored pencil on top of the darker areas as well, and I wouldn't really be able to do that well on some of the other surfaces where people normally draw with colored pencils. Here it's actually quite easy, and I'm just going to be adding both these lighter details and some of the other tones, such as ochre and a little bit of brown here and there. But my goal is mainly establishing some of the larger contrasts and larger details, and then just refining some of these finer bits and finer textures in the edges of some of these finer feathers. Now back to what I was talking about, drawing feathers. When they look kind of regular and well defined, like for example on eagles' wings or neck, or in some other cases, I find that very exhausting to draw. Now here on this owl, either because of the shape of these feathers or because of their color, I don't really know, but the texture is kind of all messy, and for some reason it was a bit easier for me to imitate the appearance of the owl's feathers, probably because they appeared a little bit more messy, and I could feel that I had a little bit more freedom to improvise, and I didn't have to stick to my reference quite as much, even though I think it's still pretty close to my reference in terms of the overall appearance. I think I made it look similar like the tiger owl's feathers. But like I said, whenever I can work a little bit more loosely and maybe deviate from the reference, I consider that a good thing, because it makes the drawing process more relaxing, quite a bit faster, and a lot more fun. So here in this part, I'm mostly using that combination of warm grey on top of those darker black areas, and then for some of the lighter bits I keep adding a bit of ivory colored pencil just to refine some of the lighter edges of those feathers which are sticking out and maybe catching a bit more light. And I also keep adding some touches of brown and ochre to make some parts of those feathers even warmer. Here on the right and at the top, I'm going to define the shape of the other horn a little bit better by working around it with a black colored pencil. And I'm going to add some more touches of some other colors to the background, mostly green and a touch of raw umber, just to make the background a bit more interesting, but it's mostly going to be very dark and almost black. I don't know how much you'll be able to notice that in my video, but there are just some finer details and finer variations in colors that you can probably only see in real life. I have to tell you that this drawing went so smoothly that I almost regretted not doing it on a larger format, but I suppose this is what made it so much fun. I do like drawing miniatures in colored pencils. Colored pencils allow for very, very detailed drawings, and but they are not that great at larger drawings because they don't cover larger areas very quickly. Of course, that doesn't mean that you can't draw larger pieces in colored pencil. The largest ones I've done in colored pencil were about 12 times 17 inches. I know a lot of people have done much larger drawings in colored pencil, but I don't really have that much patience for this medium. On sanded surface it's a little bit better, it's a little bit easier to work with them, but they're still a lot slower than pastels. But I do like them better than pastels because of all the details and because of the fact that they don't smudge nearly as much as pastels, and you don't really have to fix them. With pastels, you should, it would be good if you could fix them, but you can't really fix them because that'll change their colors. So with pastels you have a number of problems and you have to find other ways of protecting your drawings. Now here at the top of this other horn-like shape, I added some touches of orange to make the color appear a little bit brighter and stand out against the background a little bit more. But notice that we have some of these stripe-like shapes on the horns as well. So this tiger owl has a lot of stripes, and I'm going to add touches of that color variation even on these tufts of fur, on these horns. Not fur, but rather feathers. And I'm just going to make a transition from this horn area onto the side of the head and the neck. We have another lighter area here, and then some darker bits just under this horn, and then a whole bunch of these smaller, finer stripes and dots. I used a combination of darker warm grey and some brown as my base color, and then on top of that I used a touch of a light grey for some of the lighter bits to increase the contrast, and of course the black colored pencil for these stripes and spots. And here and there I'm even going to use a touch of an ivory colored pencil. I keep removing these pieces of tape to finish the corners because I'm very close to completion, but I still have to refine some of the feathers on the left side. Once I do that, the drawing will be done, because I've done pretty much what I wanted to do. The feathers on the neck and the chest area to the left look really good in my opinion, and I'm pretty happy with that. I'm just going to do a little bit of refining on the right side and at the bottom, and that should probably be it. And a few touches of black color pencil as well, just to make these stripes a little bit more complex. So these are just some of the finishing touches where I'm just refining the appearance of the feathers. I mean, it's really mostly done, but it's up to you how detailed you want to make your drawings look. Sometimes it pays off just to take a few more minutes to refine some of the details and create a more finished look on your drawing. And I added some more of this ochre to make these greyish areas appear a little bit warmer. The drawing is now done. I'm going to put my signature in the lower right corner here. If you like my content, if you like my channel, don't forget to subscribe, give me a like and comment, check out my other videos. I'm just going to do a few more touches here above the eye. And of course, if you want to see longer videos, if you want to see longer narration, some real-time footage, more content, you should check out my Patreon. But this is it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this colored pencil drawing of an owl. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.